All and welcome. I'd like to introduce today Dr. Robert Murphy, who is the Executive Director of the Institute for Global Health and the John Philip Fair Professor of Infectious Diseases here at Northwestern's Feinberg School of Medicine. Beginning today, Dr. Murphy will be answering viewers' questions pertaining to COVID-19 here on the Institute's Facebook page every Tuesday and Thursday. And we invite all of our viewers to submit any questions they may have to us directly on Facebook at NU Institute for Global Health, as well as directly via email at globalhealthinstitute@northwestern.edu. I'd like to also introduce today Katie Berg, who is a rising senior at Bucknell University, as well as an intern here with the Institute for Global Health this summer, who will be leading the conversation with Dr. Murphy today on your questions. If for any reason your question doesn't get answered today, please feel free to resubmit it as we try to get to as many questions as possible each week as we continue doing so each Tuesday and Thursday. Thank you for joining us, and Katie, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Starting with our first question that was submitted. If I was diagnosed with COVID after my first dose of the vaccine, are there any reasons not to wait the full 90 days before receiving my second dose?
There's really no real reason to wait 90 days, especially today where this Delta virus is out there and it's much more contagious. There's no magic in the 90-day number. That number actually came from observing people who had COVID. They didn't tend to relapse in the first 90 days. So there is some protection from that. But at this point, particularly if you're planning on traveling or something like that, it's okay to go ahead and get the vaccine sooner than a 90-day period after you were diagnosed with COVID. So it really kind of depends on your personal situation.
Great. And we had part of a follow-up with that was that the submitter's primary care physician mentioned that having additional antibodies in their system may have a short-term, more severe effect when they receive the vaccine. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, so after you've had COVID, you already have some antibodies to the virus, to SARS-CoV-2. So it is possible that you may have more of a reaction after you get the vaccine. However, that's not a given. It doesn't necessarily happen. So there's no real prediction there. And so those side effects are self-limited. They go away in a day or two. They're really relatively short-lived and not too serious. So I think you don't have to really worry about that so much.
Great. Why are drugs like Ivermectin and remdesivir not being used as prophylactics for COVID-19?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Ivermectin, which is used in helminthic infections, is a generic drug used worldwide to treat these tropical diseases. There is some evidence that maybe it works against SARS-CoV-2, but it sounds a lot like hydroxychloroquine to me, and that this is really not an antiviral. It has not been shown definitively to actually have a benefit in SARS-CoV-2 and COVID disease, preventing COVID disease. So this has got a long way to go before I get convinced that this should even be used. Remdesivir is an active drug, but it's given intravenously, and that makes prophylaxis, giving it early in the disease or before you actually get sick, very cumbersome, and basically it's not going to happen. What's happening though in the future is there's 3 drugs that are being developed right now in pill form. One is by Merck and Ridgeback Pharmaceuticals. One is by Atea Pharmaceuticals, and the other is by Pfizer. These are tablets, and they're dosed either once or twice a day for 1 day up to 5 days. We don't really know what the dosing schedule is going to be. That we can use for prevention and for early treatment. And there has been a program with the US government that has put $3 billion into developing these oral drugs, because with all this craziness happening with the variants out there, we need oral tablets just to address this issue, Katie, that don't exist today. And the government has basically promised that one of these or more are going to be approved by the end of this calendar year.
Wow, well, that is great news. Moving on. How did vaccine developers overcome the issue of antibody-dependent enhancement?
Antibody-dependent enhancement is not a good thing to happen with a vaccine. It happened with dengue virus most recently, but it's also happened with measles in the past and with respiratory syncytial virus. What happens is the antibody from a vaccine that's non-neutralizing. In other words, it's an antibody that it appears like with HIV, but it doesn't really do too much. It binds with the part of the virus, and actually that helps it get into the cell. It's the opposite of what's supposed to be happening. And it's called antibody-dependent enhancement. And what happens is the disease can be worse. So this is a terrible thing. So when the vaccines were being developed, they looked at different structures in the virus to make the vaccine, and they found that some of those structures, particularly the nucleocapsid, may, in the animal models, look like maybe it did enhance these antibody-dependent activity. So, that's why they then focused on the spike protein. And so the very good news is that it was not with the current vaccines today. It did not show up in the animal test. It did not show up in the clinical test. It has not shown up in the hundreds of millions of people that have now been vaccinated. So basically, it's not going to happen with the current vaccines.
That's great. Does the COVID vaccine, specifically the mRNA type vaccines, compromise our innate immune system?
No, it doesn't compromise the system at all. It stimulates the system. The system reacts very potently, much more potently than we originally thought. We set the bar pretty low, or I should say the bar was set pretty low early on, and that we thought maybe with 50% efficacy, these things could be approved. And as everybody knows, they're 90 to 95% effective, and maybe 100% effective from preventing severe disease and death.
That's great. Talking about some of the other vaccines, what are your thoughts on the Novavax vaccine? And do you expect it to have some of the same side effects or concerns that people have raised about the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines?
Yeah, so Novavax is a very different mechanism compared to the mRNA vaccine or the adenovirus vector vaccine. It's a protein adjuvant vaccine. They have a special magic adjuvant that makes it actually work better. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how this pans out once this vaccine gets approved. And it's very close to being approved right now. And their efficacy that they've reported just in the press anyway, has been in the range of 90%. So it's going to be in the range of the vaccines that are out there. So it will be our fourth vaccine, and we'll see how it goes when it gets out there. But the current studies have 30,000 people in them, and so we're going to have a lot of information very soon.
Great. Moving on, should vaccinated individuals who potentially come in a lot of contact with people, perhaps during their jobs, continue to wear masks around unvaccinated people, specifically around children that are still too young to get vaccinated?
Yeah, it's really kind of the other way around. The vaccinated people are really protected, and that's why all the rules and the guidelines everywhere have loosened up so much. The risk is in unvaccinated people. So there's two major groups of unvaccinated people. There's the people that should take the vaccine that have not, and then there's children under 12 who are not eligible to take a vaccine yet. So those are the ones that should be wearing the masks. In a school situation where you've got the teachers that are vaccinated and the kids are not, it's probably, and the same thing is true in hospitals and medical clinics, probably everybody should be wearing a mask because there's just so much activity going on. Remember, vaccinated people can get infected and they can infect other people. It's very, very unlikely, but there's always that little possibility. When they do get infected, they're not infectious for a very long period. It's a very short period that they're actually infectious. But in general, they don't have to really worry. It's the unvaccinated people that have to worry.
Yeah, and do you know if there are any updates on trials, including children under 12 getting the vaccine, or when we could possibly get that approved?
Yeah, those have been ongoing for a while now. So from 6 months to 11 years, there's several thousand children enrolled or are enrolling in this particular study, and there are probably more than one study going on in the world right now. What I have heard just in the press releases is that the data should be available this fall. And so approval should, if everything works and it's safe, which so far we haven't heard of any bad side effects or anything, should be available at that time. So fall, somewhere in the fall, by the end of the year.
Great. And in a little bit of research, I saw that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was still recommended only for people 18 plus. Is that because it has a separate mechanism of action or another reason?
No, that's another reason. It's they just started with the typical adult population, which starts at 18. For some reason, Pfizer, which is a German company, or the BioNTech, the company that actually made the vaccine, I'm not sure why they went down to 16 at the beginning. It was kind of caught people by surprise, but 16 years old are pretty developed. It was just a study design. It has nothing to do with the mechanism of action or anything like that.
Cool. Sticking with Johnson & Johnson, is there any evidence that those who received the one-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine will require a second dose?
Yeah, so their data is pretty strong in how effective this vaccine is. It's not as effective in preventing mild disease. It's only in the 72% range for preventing mild disease, but it does prevent hospitalizations and deaths pretty well, just like the other vaccines. And that's just after one injection. Now, they have a study right now going on with over 30,000 people looking at 2 doses, just like the other vaccines. That should be done pretty soon, probably in the next few months. And so we're going to hear whether 2 doses is better than 1, or if it's just more side effects. We don't know. So we'll see. There's also been recently a study looking at giving the Pfizer vaccine after, not necessarily the Johnson & Johnson, but one of the other viral vector vaccines, and that it showed that the giving the mRNA vaccine, the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, after giving the viral vector vaccine like Johnson & Johnson or AstraZeneca, actually improve the immunologic response in the person significantly. So it remains to be seen exactly how that plays out, but it was very promising data.
Awesome. If I'm allergic to ibuprofen, will that affect me when I receive my vaccine?
No, the allergic reactions to ibuprofen, pretty rare, but they happen, have nothing to do with the vaccine. Those are not part of the components of the vaccine. Matter of fact, you should not be taking ibuprofen when you get a vaccine because it actually blocks the immune response.
Great. And finally, what are your thoughts on kids going back to school in the fall that are not yet eligible for the vaccine?
Well, that's a big question. I think the schools will open up because hopefully the staff has at least been protected now with the vaccine. The kids are supposed to be wearing masks and they're supposed to be social distancing. Kids turns out in school where you have social distancing and you have the mask use and you're careful, they're not really hotbeds of infection. We've seen in kids that have gone to camps where there's a lot of other activity going on and not necessarily wearing masks because they're outside. We've seen outbreaks, including here in Illinois. There was a church camp in downstate where they had an outbreak. But in the schools, it's relatively safe. If the kids just wear the mask and social distance and the staff are vaccinated.
Well, great. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for answering these questions. I'm sure the viewers will very much appreciate it, as have we.
Yeah, and we'll be doing this. We'll start off with twice a week answering questions, as long as the questions keep coming in. So let me just tell any viewer, if you have a question or you submitted a question and we didn't answer it, just send it in again and we'll take a look at it. We're trying to answer as many as we can. And thank you all for listening.